Whew. Okay, let's do this. Hello world. Today we're going to try something different. This is going to be my first unscripted video for this channel. I'm a person that stumbles a lot and rambles a lot, so unscripted is never a good idea for me, but it brings a layer of kind of sincerity and spontaneity that I really do want for this video specifically. The other new thing about this video is that it's not about a specific genre, but rather an identity or a group of people or community on YouTube. And that's Asians on YouTube. I know, that's a huge topic. I couldn't possibly explain the many complex layers and people that are part of this topic in one video, but I'm gonna try because it is May, which is Asian Heritage Month, and I thought this would be my contribution to the celebration of Asianness that is happening around the world. I think before we get into this, it's important that I recognize my own bias, and I use the word bias to mean kind of the fact that you are of a specific identity, and so your experiences are also rather specific to that identity. And again, that could be a great thing and gives you a lot of insight into what you're talking about, but also limits the amount of things that you know and the perspectives that you have on those things. So my name is Jessica Yang. I am Chinese Canadian, and I'm very proud to be Chinese Canadian. I was born in China, and I immigrated to Canada when I was 7 years old. I am definitely not as intimately connected to Chinese culture as, say, people from China or my parents, for example, but technically I am a first-generation immigrant, and so that provides me with a perspective that might be different from people who've been here or been in the West longer. I didn't title this video Asian American or Asian Canadians on YouTube because we do also consume a lot of media from outside of those identities. It's weird to think that if you are Asian Canadian or Asian American, you are necessarily kind of just watching other Asian Americans or Asian Canadians. That's not the case. And so I wanted to broaden the scope of this video to incorporate as many Asian identities as possible, because it's kind of all a big mess of you can watch or consume anything you want, and all of those inform who you are. So some historical context of Asians on YouTube. In 2001, the Pew Research Institute produced a very seminal piece of research that stated that Asian Americans are essentially over-indexed on the internet. They found that 75% of English-speaking Asian Americans were using the internet on a regular basis, and that they were using the internet for longer periods of time and with more frequency than other groups in the US. In 2019, there was a Nielsen study that pretty much said that this kind of trend is still continuing today. So that's just Asian Americans. We can also zoom out to talk about the Asian presence on the internet as a whole, and that's a huge presence we're talking about here. 54.9% of the total online population of the world is from Asia. That's not to say that these people are of Asian descent, but they are located somewhere in Asia. So Asia accounts for more than half of the online population of the world. The penetration rate of the internet in Asia, however, is lower than in the rest of the world. But that means that there's actually more growth potential in Asia. All of those numbers were to highlight just how big of a scale we're talking, and how little my video can actually do in terms of actually overviewing what it means to be Asian on YouTube. It is perhaps just a way to introduce the fact that there are a variety of different genres being represented and a variety of different identities being represented on YouTube by Asians, and how there just needs to be more research on it. Because I think that the issue is that most of the research, or just kind of the articles or the general discourse that I've seen about Asians on YouTube, have typically focused on leaders or the pioneers of the identity or the field. And I think that's great, but I think that limiting yourself to an individual genre will make you feel like that genre can actually represent the group when it really can't. My effort here is to present as many genres as I can to recognize that there is a diversity of content being made by Asians on the internet that go beyond the pioneers that we typically think of when we think of Asians on YouTube or Asian YouTubers. Nevertheless, my evolutionary overview is going to have to start with the pioneers and the leaders that everybody talks about all the time. YouTube started as an English platform based in the US, and so necessarily that's going to mean that early Asian faces on YouTube are going to be mostly Asian American, and a lot of Asian Americans early on engaged in sketch comedy or talking head kind of stand-up style comedy videos. The earliest I can remember is Ryan Higa, Kev Jumba, and Happy Flip. I think all of them started their channel in 2006. And remember, YouTube started in 2005, so they're really kind of there early on. And then I see there being a slight difference between them and what I call the Wong Fu era, which is about 2010 and onwards, because by that time, Wong Fu was creating more high quality content that's a little more polished, that looks a little nicer, that has more mainstream media vibes. And then by 2013 and 2014, you had even more people passing down the torch, like Lily Singh, Fung Bros, Linda D Productions. Lily and Linda are also Canadian Asians, so shout out to my girls over there. But all of this really culminated in sketch comedy and talking head comedy as being a huge tradition for Asians on YouTube. And I think that's continued on, both with newcomers, but also the continued success of the people that I just talked about. A lot of the channels that were there early on have now kind of diversified their business model so that they have kind of merchandise. They have a variety of different media products like podcasts. A lot of them have crossed into legacy media with films, TV. Lily Singh had her own talk show, for example. Most of the people we were talking about were based in LA or eventually moved to LA. So it kind of represents a very American-centric perspective, but this sketch comedy, talking head comedy style definitely spread worldwide. I want to give 2 shout outs to French Asian creators or Asian French creators. Actually, I don't know how that goes. Kevin Tran and Guzu Guzu. Kevin Tran has since moved into English, but personally I like his French stuff more. So the next big genre that rose almost in parallel with sketch comedy was lifestyle and beauty. And I think everyone on the internet knows who Michelle Phan is. She, as far as I know, hasn't been very active in recent years. And meanwhile, there's been a huge kind of development of other creators in this world that I definitely don't think gets enough attention. When we think of Asian creators or we think of like kind of beauty vloggers or something like that, we always go back to Michelle Phan. And of course, she's a pioneer, but there's so many more people to talk about. From Head to Toe was huge for me in the early 2010s, as well as Jenime and Weili Huang. Since those early days, it feels like the genre has split in 2 ways. On one side, you have makeup tutorial videos, where there are still a lot of Asian creators doing very awesome, cool things, and going super strong. The other side are general lifestyle vlogging. So that consists not only of the occasional, maybe what I wear in a day or kind of outfits for fall or a makeup tutorial or a get ready with me video, but it also consists of what I eat in a day, life updates, general advice, videos about kind of identity and experiences and stuff like that. That genre has also had a lot of strong Asian creators, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. All that's to say that there's a lot of Asian presence in this world of lifestyle and beauty that can be traced back to like 2009, 2010, and it still continues strong today. So sketch comedy, lifestyle, and beauty are kind of the 2 pillars of the Asian community on YouTube. But that's not to say that there aren't any Asians in other genres. And in fact, the kind of goal of this video is to recognize that there are a lot of Asians doing a variety of different things. The next genre I want to talk about has, in my perspective, also always been there since, 2009 and 2010. And that's food. Food channels are in all cultures, in all languages, all around the world. I get that. But I do feel like food is an especially important thing to talk about in Asian cultures specifically.
Chinese culture in general, we don't usually express ourselves through words as much, or hugs, or the act of making food is the service of love.
So in my perspective, there are 3 types of food channels: instructional or kind of recipe-oriented videos, travel and restaurant reviews, and what I eat in a day. With the what I eat in a day, those are less specific channels and more part of the general lifestyle videos. So I won't talk about them as their own thing, but they are kind of, again, prevalent, especially in the representation of Asian food. In terms of instructional videos, there's a lot. There's so many that represent so many different types of food out there and so many different types of cultures. So I'm not even going to pretend like I have a comprehensive list of those types of channels. If you have ones that you prefer, please leave them in the comment section below. Again, we're here to kind of teach each other, so I'm hoping that everybody with their specific perspectives and their knowledge can help inform a collective knowledge. So that was food. And then taking like a 180-degree turn would be the fitness genre, which I made a whole video about on my channel as the first video ever. So I won't go into too much detail, but I just wanted to recognize that there are a lot of Asian creators in that world as well that's really killing it and being kind of juggernauts in that genre. Blogilates is an early example, and I think a lot of people think of her when we talk about Asian fitness creators. But Chloe Tang and Emmy Wong are honestly killing it. They're constantly listed as like the most viewed fitness YouTubers. And so I think that's kind of awesome, especially considering how Asian female bodies are generally not known to be muscular and fit and strong. I mean, as someone who wasn't fit for most of her life, it really took me watching other people who looked like me go through these fitness routines and these kind of getting more fit journeys to realize that like, oh, okay, maybe I could do it too. So going from fitness, which we sometimes don't typically think about when we think about Asians, to studying, which we do typically think of when we think of Asians. There's also a huge Asian presence on StudyTube. There are 3 types of StudyTube content. The first type would be studying tips, talking videos, vlogs kind of like this that talk about what it means to be a student and how to be the best student you can be. But you also have live study streams that can go on for a couple of hours. And finally, we have no talking study vlogs that consist of channels that seem a lot younger, but that I think are being quite innovative with the type of style that they're using. They are cutting very aesthetic ways of studying together to make studying seem just kind of a little more graceful and wonderful to do. Cool. And so related to the StudyTube genre, I think are also 2 other genres that also have strong Asian presences. One being bullet journal videos, which Amanda Richley kind of, she's just the queen of bullet journals. But you also have kind of profession-oriented videos. I kind of call this the profession genre, and I'd love to do kind of a video of that genre specifically in the future. So these are creators that just talk about kind of what it means to be in their profession. A lot of kind of advice videos on how to negotiate pays, how to manage your day. So videos about what it means to be a professional and how to live your life like that. Related to the StudyTube genre and the professional life genre, I wanted to specifically talk about the model minority myth here, because it can seem like to a certain degree, these genres feed into this stereotype of the model minority, which is the idea that Asian Americans are the ideal minority group that all other minority groups should strive to become. And it seems positive. You're saying that Asians are successful, but it can actually have a lot of bad implications. For one, it kind of turns minority groups against each other. If Asians are the standard, then, all of you other minorities should be following along. And of course, that's going to breed antagonism, because you're essentially saying that the other minority groups are doing life wrong. And that's just, we don't need any of that in anybody's life. The myth also solidifies kind of a set standard that is, the norm or the good in society. And it doesn't just perhaps turn away other minorities, it also turns away Asians who don't necessarily feel like they belong in that norm. It erases the diversity that can occur within the Asian label itself, and turn a lot of people off to feeling like they belong. And so there's a lot of backlash against the model minority stereotype, and in my perspective, it's warranted. Nevertheless, I feel like a lot of people have try to go against the model minority myth or try to solve it in a way that denies all of the success that Asians do have. Again, there are a lot of variations within the Asian label, absolutely. There are people who do study well, there are people who study poorly. The myth becomes a problem when you assume all Asians study well, right? But that's not to say that no Asians study well. And I think genres like StudyTube and the profession life genre demonstrate the success that Asians can have, and that those successes can still be part of our identity without them defining us. We're just going to ignore the fact that this shot looks a little different because I went to have lunch and the sun changed places in the sky. I realized I didn't provide somewhat of a timeline for the fitness and the StudyTube genres because there just seemed to be an influx of genres 2018 onwards. I'd say fitness was maybe late 2018, early 2019. In terms of StudyTube, the study streamers seem to have started around, or at least started to peak around 2018. But it wasn't until a little later that other StudyTubers kind of followed suit. And so along with that trend was also another genre that really started to hit it off in 2018, but has roots earlier than that. And that's the kind of cultural exchange content. So we're talking about Asian Boss, for example, or Creative Den in Korea, or Reactistan in Pakistan. These are organizations of people that invite regular people in the world to their studios in order to kind of systematically react to different things. So I think this genre in particular has some interesting implications in that firstly, it recognizes the kind of sellability and the appetite there is for content that pertains to globalization. The assumption is that YouTube is an international platform and you have potentially infinite access to any other culture in the world. And that's not necessarily true. There's linguistic silos, for example, on YouTube. There's also silos depending on national policy. So some countries, for example, might have specific rules for YouTube and how it operates within their borders. There could be walls up within certain countries that prevent people from watching things across the globe. And so I feel like these kind of explicit cultural exchange channels recognize that while YouTube could be a place for kind of an international perspective, it might not necessarily occur without these explicit kind of probing reaction type videos. So that kind of wraps up my general overview of the most major genres that have significant Asian presences within them. But again, like I said at the beginning, there's a lot of genres, sometimes very niche, sometimes very broad, that have significant Asian representation. So here's a montage of just some of the genres that I did not talk about that still have a lot of awesome Asian creators. Spot your favorites, guys. cultural significance, the theoretical nitty-gritty of it all. The first topic is that Asians on YouTube have been particularly beneficial and significant for the Asian diasporic community. The word diaspora essentially means people outside of their homeland. I think for me, the Growing Up Asian American tag and the different videos that have been done under that tag was extremely significant, because here were these real people reflecting on how they grew up in their different contexts. It is that self-reflection and that cultural expression that we really didn't have growing up with mainstream media in the West. There's been arguments by some people that the West doesn't represent Asian communities or Asian identities, and so therefore, we should just go back to our home country's media and consume what they create. I think the kind of blindness of that approach is that the diaspora, the people who left the homeland, is necessarily not going to have the same perspective as the homeland either. And that's not even considering the fact that there are many people back in the homeland that look down upon you for leaving. And so there's a lot of different complexities that only diasporic people understand that aren't really represented in either the host country or the home country. So that's why I think the kind of Growing Up Asian American, Growing Up Asian Canadian tag is so important. The multitude of those perspectives and the complexity that those videos allow is the way forward to combat stereotypes, because you can't possibly have one character that is able to represent all of these things. But in mainstream media, that's kind of what you have to do, because you might just have that one character or that one family or whatnot. But online, you can have, a plenitude, a variety of different perspectives, and everyone can be talking in a variety of different ways about who they are and what that means to them. A similar effect happened when Subtle Asian Traits first came out, which is kind of a close group of memes and posts about Asian diasporic communities. It's not always about the diaspora, because I know there's a lot of people based in Asia who are also in that group. But because it is an English-speaking group, necessarily you're going to have kind of Asians that speak English, that might be kind of more spread across the world. The kind of small things that happen in that group, the boba jokes or the slang like ABG or ABC or CBC or BBC, like all of those points or jokes become symbols of a shared culture and a shared cultural expression. And like, seriously, before the creation of that group, I really didn't think that Asian diasporic communities had their own culture per se. We understand that, okay, we're a mix between Western culture and Eastern culture, but that's it, right? Like, we don't have our own thing. But like, when you realize that there's so many symbols and inside jokes and all that kind of stuff, and that are being circulated as media online, those things help you realize that, like, oh no, you are your own thing. You can create your own system of cultural expression that validates your particular experience that is different from both the home country and the host country, right? And so I think that's kind of a beautiful thing, and it's made me more proud to be not just Asian, but Asian Canadian, to recognize that I am part of something beyond myself. I hope that's something that we can move forward with, either in mainstream media or outside. I've never been too obsessed that Asian representation needs to be championed in mainstream media. I hope that that's the case one day, but I also think that, online worlds are creating these new and innovative ways, and so we also just need to celebrate that and allow that to develop, rather than have all of the attention go back to legacy media whenever possible, right? Like, that's not the end all be all now. We can have these online spaces where these kind of expressions happen, and it's a beautiful thing. given everything that I've just talked about before, it kind of makes sense that a lot of people see the internet as an alternative to mainstream media. And I feel like to an extent that's definitely true, but that's kind of overlooking the fact that there were indie films and even TV and radio stations that have given a voice to Asian minorities for the longest time before the internet existed. The root of the term Asian American comes from the civil rights movements of the 1960s. And those movements were steeped in anti-capitalist sentiment. So there was this idea that the capitalist system, capitalism in general, systematically kept some groups at a certain disadvantage by keeping them poor. And so a lot of those alternative media outlets were ways of going against the capitalist system. They relied on distribution models that weren't based on money. In that way, the internet is not alternative. It's still based on very capitalist ideologies. And so if it's not a complete alternative, then it might actually be continuing structures of oppression and inequalities that we've had in the past. The seeming abundance of Asian content, it makes it seem like anti-Asian racism and anti-Asian discrimination doesn't exist online. And that's not true. There's a great book called Algorithms of Oppression by Sophia Noble. And I think the big revelation that I had while reading that book was that you can have an abundance of information and content and still have the system rigged against you. So I think it's important to realize that while the internet is to an extent alternative to mainstream media, it could still be propagating many of the same issues that we've faced in mainstream media, and that with every celebration of kind of an abundance of representation and goodness in the world, there also needs to be a critical mindset that keeps the potential negative parts in check. The final question I wanted to talk about is this idea of cultural appropriation online. So the two words, cultural, different groups of people, ethnic groups, cultural groups, that kind of thing. And then appropriation is one group taking from another and repurposing it for a new context. Just based on those two definitions alone, there doesn't seem to be anything overtly problematic. In fact, sometimes the word appropriation can be taken to be a good thing. In terms of cultural appropriation, however, usually we're talking about a group of higher power taking something from a group of lower power and not sharing any of the credit or the monetary gain with that original group. I think the nature of the internet, the fact that it is based on networking different people together and different machines and computers together, the internet facilitates appropriation of many different kinds, including cultural, from kind of just being online long enough and knowing the kind of intricacies of Asian content specifically online. It feels like some genres that are popular in the West have their roots in Asian cultures. Mukbang is a perfect example. The word mukbang is Korean, has Korean roots, and it comes from South Korea. Luckily, with this genre, it's kept its Korean roots by its Korean name, but you know, a number of other stylistic or generic characteristics could also have those Asian roots, but because they're not labeled as such, the Asianness of its origins kind of get lost. I think it's interesting to think about, firstly, how we would even research that. You're essentially trying to find the genealogy of a specific stylistic. You're talking about genres, you're talking about taxonomy, you're talking about categorization and characterization, all of which are like kind of main themes and tools for my own channel. So that's definitely something that interests me. Is that something worth doing? Is that something good to be doing? Does that have other negative implications? Can we even say that, you know, cultural appropriation is not allowed on the internet? Because, like, how would you even enforce that? How would you police that? And should you be policing that, right? A lot of media comes from people taking from each other, either giving credit or not. And so if you deny that, if you say, no, that's just morally incorrect or ethically not okay, where does that leave us in terms of the global sphere of the internet? Do we get more silos? Do we get more, national and racial pride? Is that a good thing? Is that not a good thing? Like, there's just so many questions that we could be talking about when it comes to the word cultural appropriation. And actually, I never like it when people just kind of use that term to shut down conversations. Like, well, that's just cultural appropriation and that sucks. And I'm like, it could suck, but could we talk about why it sucks, right? Like, let's go get into this. And I feel like the question of Asians on YouTube isn't just kind of the obvious Asian face on YouTube. It's also the content and the style and the genres and the traditions that come from people of Asian descent or from Asia as a region. And do we label them and ensure that they're never forgotten as Asian, or do we let them kind of spread across the world freely and slowly diluting or even losing their Asianness along the way? I don't know the answers, but I think they're interesting theoretical concepts to think about and to reflect on. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this little journey through all of the Asian creators on YouTube. Not all of them. I emphasize that it's not all of them at all. It's not even close to being all of them. Instead of thinking of this as an overview, I guess I'd think of this as an invitation to visit more Asian creators on the website. Also an invitation for you guys watching to leave your favorite Asian creators down in the comment section. Together, maybe we can build a repertoire and knowledge base that is bigger than myself and my own individual brain. And with that, I think that should be the end of that credit roll. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys are having a good May, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!